This video is about the ACF Brill production after World War II. Before the war, they were making a lot of buses that were very utilitarian. They were strong, they were reliable, they ran well, but they were just all practical. They didn't have any pizzazz. After World War II, the company had a whole lot of orders coming in, and they wanted to really put out something unique and exciting, modern, a lot of curves in the metal, and they had the technology to do it. They were very enthusiastic about the future. They had a lot of orders coming in. So they were going to design some things that were really stand out. Here's the C-31, very nice. Excuse me, C-36. They went to work on designing upholstery for the interiors, plastic trim. This is going to set them apart from everybody else. They went and built models of the seats, just tried to think it all out to be really appealing for the customers. They built models of the bodies, and the next step up was to start making the parts of all this. Each body section had a lot of small pieces from they could put all together, but they had to make it curved, and it had to have very close fit. All the parts had to fit just right, and had to be interchangeable. Now, one way to do it would be to have a bunch of men in a machine shop, or women, and just beat the metal with hammers on forms to make the parts you need. But that was expensive to do. It would take a lot of time. And when you got done, the parts would not be interchangeable. So they didn't do that. Big automobile companies would build huge presses and dies that would fit in them. Very carefully made dies. They were going to pound metal into the doors and the hoods and everything of the modern automobiles, so they had to have real strong dies made with punches that would fit against them and make all these parts. Is what they did. It was expensive, but they made so many doors and hoods and trunk lids that it would pay for itself. The volume of sales would cover the expensive costs of making that. But in a bus business, you couldn't do that because they weren't going to sell that many buses. So the cost of these huge metal-made dies and punches wouldn't work for them. But they come up with another kind of a plan. It was called the Kirk-site approach. Now here's a picture of a big press with a Kirk-site die in it, and it's making roof panels with the back window in it. Okay, and that was possible because they had the Kirk-site operation going. They would start out by making a full-size mock-up of a bus part. Here they've got a C-36 front end that they're working on, and I've seen them made of clay, other things, and that would tell you what it was going to be when it was done. That was the positive. Then they would take plaster and make a cast of certain sections of that big piece, and they would make the small parts from that. They'd take the plaster cast, and here's one here for a roof line. They were going to do a pattern for it. And then after they had the plaster cast, which is a negative, they would put that into sand in a sandbox, and then take out the plaster, and the sand would make the shape of whatever you were trying to make, and they would pour in molten kirksite, which was a mixture of zinc, some aluminum, some copper, other metals mixed in with it. And if you were stamping aluminum, which is soft, the kirksite will work. If you're stamping steel, kirksite will wear out right away. So this was a way that they could do it with aluminum, and it would work. When they got done, the kirksite die was finished, then they could clean it with a hand grinder, just polish it up, finish off any edges, and then they would put that into a press, and that would make your part. There's two parts with a die. You have the die itself with its shaping pattern on it, and then you have a punch that moves up against it, and both of them have to fit perfectly. And then you put those into a big machine. This machine was made by Seaco Stamp, and that's making the back window. The parts come together with a lot of force, and that makes your part that you need out of a flat piece of steel. Aluminum. And there's another way you can also mold the aluminum. They have a stretching machine, and the metal is pressed around the mold, the die, and that will make it fit. And then the edges are cut off. Now, the ACF Brill company had high hopes for the future. They built a new building. This is building 46. It's right next to the old one that you see all the pictures of the trolley cars being made in, and buses and big long lines. That was building 46. This is building 40. They built that right at the end of the war because they were getting ready for the future. They were very optimistic about the future. They borrowed a lot of money from banks to build all this and to buy the tools. And they were going to make a lot of money and profits and then be able to pay the bank back. They did not know about all the cancellations of the orders were coming in 1947 and 48. They didn't know about the losses that were going to come out of the Nashville division or the Lycoming division. So these things all came together to really put Brill underwater for a long time. Here's a picture here of the pieces of aluminum ready to be put into a press to make parts. Down the bottom we show bodies being put together. And up here is interesting. They have a front of an IC-41 that's been made out of pieces and welded all together. And if you had a crash and you needed a new front end, this whole thing is made to fit perfectly on to the bus. Just take the old front end off that's been crushed and put the new one in place and weld everything in and bolt it all in. And here they are again working with this big press. Now, Bill Powelson told me that Brill's also had a patent for a ceramic mold system that would be able to pour an entire bus roof in one shot, all one big piece. That doesn't really sound practical to me, but that's what he told me. He referred to buses down in Washington, D.C., in the 70s, the late 60s and 70s, were having leaking roofs. Whereas if you had a one-piece roof, you didn't have to worry about that. Now, after the war, Brill actually set up an assembly line. This isn't it here. This is the old way. Buses were lined up. Men would run out, women would run out and put pieces on as they could. And then if a bus got done, they would just pick it up with a crane and carry it to the front and out. The buses are going down the left side. On the right side are a bunch of trackless trolleys that are being built, all in the same building. They were proud of their ventilation systems. It was pretty modern. They were also proud of their engines. They'd get these Hall Scott engines into big crates and start installing them. There was an article in Automotive Industries on August 15th, 1951, about how Brill's was getting their assembly lines really rolling right. And they made copies of this to hand out as a brochure for people to tell them about their company and what they're doing. And here they're putting a motor in the back of a C-31 or a Army C-37. It's a red diamond engine. And this was set up so that one man could run this dolly and install the engine all by himself. Here's a picture of the new assembly line, 1951. The buses would run down it sideways. It didn't move like a regular assembly line. They'd put the frame onto a dolly. There was a railroad track underneath the whole thing with a big chain on it, and there was a big motor at the end of the shop that would pull the buses along. Now, they didn't go all the time. They'd have the bus in place for 1 hour, and people would run around and put a lot of features into it, all the parts and plumbing, whatever needed to be done, wiring. And then a whistle would blow at the end of 1 hour, and then 1 minute later, the thing would move to the next station. And then more people would come out and start putting parts on that bus. And it moved along like that. And when you got to the end of the building, they had to come out of building building 46, building 40, and move around the corner to continue the line in building 46. So they had a crane that would hook hooks onto the wheels, and the man would operate a crane and would take it around the corner to the next area where we go down. There were about 60 stations, 56 stations, something like that, along the way. When they would move along, there would be the painting booths. They'd have infrared lights on the paint job to harden it, dry it quickly. Then they put the glass in. At the end of the line, they would do the finish painting jobs. And here you see people working on a Greyhound very carefully. These people are experts to get everything just right. And then move it on out to be test driven. So they had things under pretty good control. They managed to pay down all their debt in the early 50s. Some of it was military contracts that helped them. But then the orders just weren't there. There were too many other bus companies making buses at the same time. They tried a lot of different things to make money, to get contracts, to get orders. Eventually, they decided to sell everything and take the money and invest in something else.